The spokesperson for the Saudi Embassy in D.C. for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Fahad Nazer, joins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Sir, welcome back to the program, and thanks for sticking with us through these technical issues.
No worries, Jimmy. Thank you so much for having me on again.
You know how technology is, especially in this crazy COVID era that we're in, so I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Once again, Fahad Nazer is our guest. He is the spokesperson for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia Embassy in Washington, D.C. And I want to go right to something that just came out in the last couple of days, sir, and that is the annual pilgrimage to Mecca known as the Hajj. There's some news that came out this week about the number of people that will be able to go, how you're still going to have the annual pilgrimage. But tell us what the dynamics are going to be like, the expectations now, if you could, please, given COVID.
Right. So we issued a statement yesterday saying that Hajj will take place this year. However, they'll happen in a very limited capacity. The people who will be able to go will be a very small number of people from various nationalities who already reside in the kingdom. So no people will be coming in from across from any other countries to perform due to the fact that obviously we are still in the midst of dealing with this COVID pandemic. And from a public health perspective, we wanted to make sure that we're doing our part globally to prevent the spread of this pandemic, and obviously having hundreds of thousands of people, Muslims from all over the world, come in to our holy sites and then go back to their countries and congregate in this fairly limited space and then go back to countries all around the world was not a safe thing to do. So we took this measure, and it was a difficult decision, but it was certainly the right decision, again, to prevent this pandemic from spreading even more.
Now, is this unprecedented? Is this something that has not happened before, or is it a very rare occasion? Because it seems like it's, you really have to find a situation like COVID-19 and the spread of it to get to that sort of level to make it so that you put these kinds of restrictions in place. It seems like a pretty big step.
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 is a pandemic the likes of which we have not seen in a very long time. It's a pandemic in every sense of the word. It has spread to, I believe, 190 different countries around the world. The kingdom did act very quickly and very early to deal and to limit its spread inside the kingdom. I think I might have mentioned this to you the last time I was on your show, but we closed our borders, we closed our schools, we closed our universities. We instituted a curfew in all major cities, and we had institutions, healthcare institutions in place to make sure that we limit its spread. We've done a very good job on that front inside the kingdom. At the same time, this year we are the president of the G20 organization, and in our capacity as president, we actually called for a virtual summit back in March to focus the international community's attention on coming up with vaccine and therapeutics and diagnostics. We also contributed $500 million to various international healthcare organizations to work on vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So we're doing everything we can, both inside the kingdom as well as globally, to mitigate and to minimize the effect and the spread of this pandemic.
In terms of the war in Yemen and what we have seen there vis-a-vis COVID-19, I know that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Fahad Nazer, has provided resources to the region, to that country, the people there, vis-a-vis COVID-19 and other humanitarian issues of concern. Please tell us a little bit more about how that's evolved since we last spoke.
Right, so the kingdom, as of last count, has provided $17 billion in humanitarian aid to Yemen over the past 6 years. This has come in the form of food, medicine, support to schools, healthcare facilities, water treatment facilities, energy stations, support to the central bank, support to the United Nations programs there. And this is all to help stabilize Yemen and to kind of push it forward to over this conflict and this crisis that it has been mired in over the past 5 years. We are supporting the internationally recognized government in Yemen. We have been doing so since 2015 after it sent us a formal request for support. We are also supporting efforts by the United Nations Special Envoy there to come towards a political resolution of the crisis. So we're doing everything we can on multiple fronts. But as you said, we are also very keen and very to make sure that COVID does not spread to Yemen. So we actually provided healthcare authorities there $25 million a couple of months ago, specifically to deal with corona and to make sure it doesn't spread in the kingdom and further aggravate the humanitarian situation there.
When we spoke a couple of months ago on this program, one of the things that we discussed was the unilateral or the ceasefire in Yemen on the part of Saudi Arabia and the government there. However, there have been reports that violence has still continued, that the ceasefire has not really taken shape in full form. Can you tell us about the status of that?
Right, so we are still abiding by the ceasefire. Again, we instituted it to give the United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen a chance to succeed as he's moving forward and trying to get the various parties to the conflict back to the negotiating table. Unfortunately, the Houthis, this Iranian-backed militant militia, has violated the agreement and the ceasefire on multiple occasions. Just last night, it sent 8 drones and 3 ballistic missiles towards Saudi Arabia. Thankfully, they were all intercepted, but it really kind of underscores just their callous disregard for civilian life and civilian infrastructure. They targeted mostly civilian targets in the kingdom. Of course, that is not a surprise because they have targeted civilians and civilian infrastructures in Yemen throughout the past 5 years. They have recruited child soldiers. They have put mines, over 1 million mines all across Yemen. So they have, like I said, shown complete disregard for the safety and well-being of Yemeni people, and they're trying to do the same thing and endanger our own people in Saudi Arabia, and we will not let that stand.
Again, we're talking with Fahad Nazer, who is the spokesperson for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the embassy in Washington, D.C. In terms of Yemen, I mean, the United States, we talked about this a little bit last time, the United States has been supportive of Saudi Arabia's support of the Yemeni government there, particularly because the Houthi rebels are backed by the Iranian regime, and that is absolutely a common enemy, common threat that the United States shares with the vast majority of the region, in fact. But there are a lot of Americans who have seen politicians in Washington, D.C., who have spoken out against the United States' support of what you guys are doing in Yemen, to the extent that we have provided aid and military support and what have you. And so I would love you to explain, please, why you think it is so important that the United States actually is involved in providing some aid, and that it doesn't, as Congress, many in Congress have tried to do, that it doesn't get cut off.
Right. So as I said at the outset, Saudi Arabia didn't start this war. We never wanted it. It was a war of necessity, not a war of choice. When we did intervene, we made sure that we do have the backing of the international community. In fact, there is a United Nations Security Council Resolution 2216 that was passed almost unanimously supporting our effort there. Yemen is an important country. We wanted to, it's right along our border, obviously. We wanted to make sure that it does not fall prey and fall victim to not just one, but potentially 3 militant, violent terrorist groups in the form of ISIS, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and also this militant organization, this militant militia backed by Iran, known as the Houthis. So the prospect of an important country, it has a very strategic location right along the Red Sea. The prospect of that becoming a failed state or a safe haven for, again, not one, but 3 militant, violent organizations, or rather I shouldn't say organizations, but militias and terrorist organizations, all 3 of which, by the way, have crossed into Saudi Arabia and attacked us in the past, was simply not a scenario that we were willing to accept. So we are doing everything we can to restore peace and stability and prosperity in Yemen. And I think there are a lot of people, a lot of members of Congress who have come, I think, full circle towards realizing that the Houthis are a very menacing force. They're not a force for good, that they are endangering not just the lives of people in Yemen. They're trying to endanger, obviously, Saudi Arabia's security, but they have also launched missiles at American naval forces and ships in the past. So they're not to be taken lightly. And again, because of the fact that they are backed by Yemen, we absolutely need to send a very clear message to Yemen that you are not going to do what you've done in Lebanon by creating this militant Hezbollah group there. You're not going to do the same thing in Yemen. That is simply not in the cards.
But so the crux of the matter, though, is that the Houthis are backed by Iran, and that's centrally important here because it is not only a threat to the region, Iran, but to the world, and to such a point too in the region where we have at least seen conversations among some different powers in the Middle East who have not been necessarily as communicative in the past, specifically because it seems that there is this recognition about how significant Iran is as a threat in terms of not just its nuclear potential, but also because of the fact that it is trying to destabilize various parts of the Middle East and the globe with its incursions.
Absolutely. I mean, Iran has this terrible track record going back to 1979 of trying to violate every norm and convention of the international community. They continue to support various non-state actors, militant actors. They began doing it in Lebanon. They continue to do it in Iraq. They're trying to do it in Yemen. This is obviously in addition to the fact that they are the primary sponsor of terrorist groups and organizations around the world. Their terrorist groups and proxies have conducted attacks, not just in the region, but they've done it in Europe, in the heart of Europe. They even tried to do it here in the United States when they tried to assassinate our former ambassador right here in Washington, D.C. So they have no limits. They simply they're an egregious violator of the norms and the laws of the international community. And the United States and Saudi Arabia are fully aligned in pushing back against Iran's malign behavior in the region. We are fully supportive of the maximum pressure policy of the United States because we think that, for lack of a better analogy, but the carrots, the carrots and sticks analogy, carrots do not work with Iran. They only respond to sticks, unfortunately.
And I just want to underscore, from my perspective, that in terms of American support of this, shall we say, proxy war in Yemen, it is all about Iran. That is the threat that we are facing that is common and that is significant. And one of the things that I think the Trump administration has recognized in the past few years, and I'd appreciate it if you would speak to this, is that Iran is such a threat to the point where they withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal, which was fundamentally flawed on every level, but also have been working very hard, I think, to repair some of the weakened relationships that many of the Middle Eastern powers have had with the United States under former President Barack Obama, who seemed to really be trying to soften up more and more with Iran, hence the Iranian nuclear deal. And so I think we have a fundamental shift in view of the region and what needs to be done, particularly vis-a-vis the threat of Iran under the Trump administration compared with the previous administration, and that is central as well to the Middle Eastern policy of the United States and our relationship with a country like Saudi Arabia.
Right. So there's no doubt that the Trump administration appreciates the productive and constructive role that Saudi Arabia plays, not just in the Arab world, but across the broader Muslim majority world. We work with the United States on many different fronts. Like I said, Iran countering and pushing back against Iran's malign influence and behavior is just one front to it. We also work very closely on the counterterrorism front in terms of hitting and countering and containing terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We have done that for well over almost 2 decades at this point. And in fact, our cooperation on the counterterrorism front has saved the lives of thousands of people in Saudi Arabia, in the United States, and elsewhere. We're also cooperating on trying to resolve unfortunately, the many crises and conflicts in the region, whether it's Yemen, Libya, Syria, or other conflicts. We're also, I think, largely aligned when it comes to trying to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So we have a lot in common. We work on many different fronts, and I think our cooperation has been and will be the key to peace and stability in the region.
Just a few minutes left with our guest, Fahad Nazer, who is the spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian Embassy in Washington, D.C. One of the things that the United States has been looking out around the globe at has been what's happening with oil. We have significant oil and gas industry here in America. Of course, Saudi Arabia does, and Saudi Arabia is a leading member of OPEC. Talk to me a little bit about the oil situation, oil stabilization, and oil production as Saudi Arabia views it at this point in time, especially given that COVID-19 has significantly decreased the number of people who've been driving and flying, and therefore meaning significantly decreasing demand.
Right. So a couple of points are worth underscoring here. So the kingdom has always put a high premium on stable international energy markets. It has always promoted moderate prices that are fair to both producers and consumers. And it has always stressed the importance of burden sharing among producers. So more recently, Saudi Arabia played the main role in orchestrating what was a historic OPEC Plus agreement on April 12th, which reduced global production by well over 10 million barrels a day. We have secured more commitments from some of our G20 nations for another 3 million. So, and that has already paid dividends. So back in April, prices were, the price of oil was hovering actually well under 20. It is $20 a barrel. It is over $40 a barrel. So that has been, I think, a positive development. I think we, like I said, we are very cognizant of the fact that we have nations that are producers, nations that are consumers, and we always try to strike this delicate balance that benefits all countries alike.
Now, there are some in the United States who would say that the Saudi Arabia and OPEC are doing whatever they can to sort of dismantle or diminish at least the American oil industry. I'm seeing a report here from oilprice.com noting that Saudi Arabia is on track to secure its highest oil market share in 40 years. What do you say to those who would say that Saudi Arabia has handled production, especially in the last several months, last couple of years, has been handling production issues in such a way to try to weaken the American oil industry?
No, that's simply not true. We have actually, not only have we abided by our commitments to the commitments that we made on April 12th to reduce 3 million barrels. We've actually gone out of our way and gone beyond our commitments and now have reduced our production by some 4.8 million barrels a day. So that 4.8 million barrels is more oil than most countries produce around the world. So we are certainly not, we don't engage in politics to intentionally damage economies or sectors of other economies, certainly not the United States. The United States is our most important strategic partner and ally in the world. It is also our second biggest trading partner. So by and large, what is good for the U.S. economy is good for Saudi Arabia and vice versa. So we are not, I've seen some reports about oil shipments coming from Saudi Arabia to the United States, and I think a lot of the reports have not been very accurate. What the shipments are, they are actually in fulfillment of contracts with long-term U.S. customers that were concluded a long time ago. We are not looking for new customers. The oil tankers are coming in over an extended period of time. They will be here over 2 months, unlike some of the reports that suggest that they would all show up on U.S. shores on one day. The exports have no impact on storage levels at Cushing or anywhere else in the United States. And I think just as importantly, the grade of Saudi oil that comes to the United States is very different from shale oil, for instance. So we are not competing. We are just, it's a different kind of oil, and we are responding to current demand in the United States. We're not looking for new customers.
And final question for you, since you just mentioned the United States, you viewed as my country, the United States of America, as Saudi Arabia's most important strategic partner and ally. What does that mean, especially in terms of practical geopolitics?
Well, what it means is that, I think I might have mentioned this last time, but if I didn't, I certainly we'll make sure to mention it now. But this year marks the 75th anniversary of the first meeting between the late King Abdulaziz Al Saud, the founder of modern-day Saudi Arabia, and the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt aboard the USS Quincy in the Suez Canal back in 1945. And since that time, in those 75 years, the relationship has continued to deepen and to broaden and to strengthen on multiple levels. As I said, this relationship is multidimensional. Over the years, we have actually accomplished quite a bit together. So, for one, we work closely together to defeat global communism. In 1990, 1991, we expelled Saddam Hussein's forces from Kuwait. More recently, in 2014, 2015, again, our troops fought side by side to defeat and expel the terrorist group known as ISIS from Syria and Iraq. As I mentioned, we are working closely together to stabilize energy markets. We're closely working together to stop Iran's malign activities in the region. We're working closely together to restore peace and prosperity and stability in Yemen. We're trying to resolve the conflict in Syria. We're trying to resolve the conflict in Libya. So we are really in alignment on almost every major issue that the region is facing. This relationship is, I think, mutually beneficial. It has endured for as long as it has for a reason, and we certainly look forward to it enduring and strengthening going forward.
I want to be respectful of your time, given the technical delays, but Fahad Nazer, I really appreciate your time today, and I look forward to having you back, hopefully on camera. We can delve into a few other angles on these different topics as well. Thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me, Jimmy.
I appreciate it. Once again, Fahad Nazer is the spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian Embassy in Washington, D.C. Still have some other angles and things I'd love to get to. Hopefully we'll have the opportunity in the future to do just that here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. You just watched a clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel today. You want to catch our live show. And I love your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.
Awesome.